Greetings, my name is Odin from the Odin's Musings YouTube channel, and I'm here on behalf of our crystals. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create the African Helix Stitch. This is a very interesting hollow weave, which is kind of reminiscent of a DNA strand. This one is also unique since we create this stitch not by going through beads, but by passing around threads. It's a great stitch for wide open bangles, or high collar necklaces and chokers. To create this stitch, we're going to be using two contrasting colors of size 11 seed beads. Now, you want to take into consideration what bead you want to make the main body, and what bead you want to make the spine or the accent. For this case, I'm going to use the green as the spine and the purple as the body. You will also need a clasp of your choice. In my case, this is going to be a lobster claw accompanied by a jump ring. You will also need two accent beads with fairly large holes in order to accompany the clasp. Here I'm using size 8 seed beads, but feel free to use things such as 3mm or 4mm beads. You're also going to need either a pen or a dowel or pencil that is about 5 to 6mm in width, so that we can support the stitch as we progress through. For the one that I created with the 15 O's, I used a paintbrush, which is roughly 3mm in width. I'm also using a D-weight white Nymo, but feel free to use anywhere between a 4 to an 8 pound test of Fireline. I'm also using a size 12 beading needle, but feel free to use whatever you are comfortable with. And with that being said, let us get started. So my base ring is going to be composed of 16 beads total. It's going to be an alternating pattern of 3 color A's and 1 color B, which is your body bead and your spine bead. I've added this pattern 4 times because that's how many units we're going to use in the pattern. I'm going to pull that down my thread, leaving about a 10 to 12 inch tail so that we can add our clasp at the other side. Then I'm going to form a loop with these beads just by passing through each one of them once more. Like that. And then when we pull tight, our ring will start to form. Now from here, we want to tie an overhand knot with our tail and our working thread, which is left over right, pull tight, then right over left. Then when we have our knot in place, I'm just going to pass back through the spine bead again so that we hide the knot. Now that we have our base ring, I'm going to thread it on so that my working thread is on the left side of the bead. This is my tail end, and I want to keep that away. And my working thread is going to hang out on the left side of the bead that we're coming out of. If you're left-handed, you might want to try flipping it over so that the thread comes out of the right side of the bead and move in a counterclockwise direction. But since I'm right-handed and it makes it a little bit easier for me, I'm going to work clockwise. And what might be easier is to wrap the tail end around your pen, just so that it stays out of the way and doesn't get tangled. And then just take a small piece of tape and cover the thread to keep it out of the way, and taping it to the pen. And now we're good to start our stitch. So every stitch that we're doing is going to be composed of 3 color A's and 2 color B's. This is how it's going to go for the entire length of the bracelet. So we're going to add that onto our thread. And then we're going to jump over, and we're going to pass beneath the work and pick up the thread that's in between the next color B and the last color A. And we want to make sure that that thread ends up between those 2 beads. And that is what our first stitch will look like. Once more, 3 color A's, 2 color B's, jump over to the next color B bead and pass behind the threads in between the color B and the last color A. Pull that down and make sure your thread goes down and sits between those 2 beads. Once more, 3 color A's, 2 color B's, jump over to the next color B, pass behind the thread between those 2 beads. Pull down to make your next stitch. Once more, 3 color A's, 2 color B's, jump over, and this will be the first bead that we started from. Go between the last color B and the last color A. Pull through and finish the row. That is what our first row looks like. We're going to now start to form the spiral on the third row. We don't need to do anything special to step up, but now we're just going to add our beads. Then we're going to jump over between the last color A from the next loop and the first color B. So I'm going to pass my thread between the two color beads, pass through, and trap my thread between those two beads. And this builds my spiral. You can kind of see it's starting to arc towards the left. Do that again, add your 5 beads, skip over between the last color A and the first color B on your next stitch, pull down, and create your new stitch. Try to keep your thread tension tight too, so that you don't end up with wide gaps in your thread spacing. It gets easier as you progress downward, but just keep that in mind as you're working through. Add your beads again, jump over between the last color A and the first color B of the next stitch, pull down, and trap your thread between those two beads to form your next loop. Add your beads, go between the last color A and the first color B of the next stitch, and trap the thread through. From here we start a new row, so we add on our beads and we move between the color A and the color B of our next row. This will be row number 3 in this case. Pass that through, and we're beginning row number 4. Add your beads, jump over and pass behind color A and color B, pull through, and be sure to trap your thread between those two beads. One more stitch, jump behind to the next color A and color B, pull through, and trap your thread. Last stitch for this row, we add on our beads, we jump over to catch the color A and the color B, pull through, and trap the thread. Now we're ready to create row number 5. Continue in this manner for a little bit until you feel comfortable with the stitch, and then I can show you how to end threads and attach new ones. So once you have a good length going and you are looking to change your threads, all we're going to do is work up through one of the spines where our thread is coming from. So what I'm going to do is pass up through several of the beads. My stitch has ended here. We're just going to pull that up, and then we're going to tie a half-hitch knot to secure the thread. So I'm going to go beneath the threads where my spine is and where my thread is coming out of, and pass my needle beneath that until I form a loop with my thread. I'm going to pass my needle through that loop and pull tight. Then I'm going to move up a few more beads, tie another half-hitch knot, picking up the thread bridge beneath the two beads that I'm at, pull until I form a loop with my thread, pass my needle through that loop, and pull tight. Go up a few more beads, and do the same thing. Make a half-hitch knot going underneath the threads until I form a loop, pass my needle through that loop, and pull tight. Now, I'm going to trim, leaving a small tail just so that I know which spine that I've worked off of. So I've got that little marker there. And I'm going to kind of do the same thing, except backwards, to add a new thread. So this is where I've ended my thread. I'm going to go to the one above it and pick up a few beads, leaving about a 1-inch tail in case the knot slips. Then I'm going to do half hitch knots again. I'm going to pass underneath the threads in that spine, pull my thread through until I form a loop, pass my needle through that loop, and pull tight. Go down a few more beads, make another half hitch knot, go down a few more, make one last half hitch knot, then I'm going to go down until I've reached the last loop. You can kind of, if you pull it apart, see where that stitch has ended up, where it jumps across the threads on this spine. So I'm moving down there. Then I'm going to move through the 5 beads of that last stitch. From there, I'm going to go behind, right where this stitch ended, and pull through, trapping the thread where it needs to be. From here, I can continue my stitch. So I add my 5 beads, I jump over, and pass through, so that I've continued the helix. And I keep going on with my new thread. I can also trim off these 2 tails, since I'm not going to need them anymore. And just continue that until you have the length of your bracelet. So we're going to need to do a little bit of a setup on this end in order to attach the clasp on this side so that it matches this side. So after you've added your last stitch, what we're going to do is pass through the last 2 beads, the color B beads. You can kind of see my thread starting to get up over there. Now I've essentially changed my thread direction, so I'm moving counterclockwise instead. I'm going to pick up 3 color A beads and then pass through the very last color B bead on the bottom of the spine. To cinch that closed, I'm going to pick up another 3 color A beads, jump over, and pass through the very last color B bead on the bottom of that spine. We're doing that again 4 times to meet the other side. So I've just added my 3rd set, and my last set will start off and pick up the very last bead on that row. This is where we started from. Now we've cinched the spiral together, what we're going to do is seal it up by passing through every single one of those beads again. So I'm just going to pass through the color A's, that one color B, the color A's, and go through and reinforce the row. Then we're ready to pull it off of our support rod, pull everything tight so that things cinch together. And that is what our bottom half looks like. We're going to pass through until we come to a color B. Then we're going to add 3 color Bs. My accent bead, in my case, is a size 8 seed bead. You can use a 3mm or a 4mm. Then half of my clasp. I'm going to pull that down, pass back through the accent bead and the 3 color Bs, pull that down, and then pass through the opposite side of the spine bead that we started from to secure it in place. We're going to then go around again and pass through the top ring until we're through a color B. I'm going to add 3 more color Bs, pass up through the accent bead, through the clasp again, then back down through the accent bead and the seed beads that we've added, pass through the opposite side of the bead that we started from. To secure that in place, move around the top ring until we've reached the next color B, and do the same thing. Add on 3 color Bs, go up through the accent bead, pass through the clasp, Go back down through the accent bead and the beads that we've just added. Then go back through the opposite side of the bead that we started from. Move down to the last color bead and repeat, add another branch underneath the accent bead. Then once you've done that, you can reinforce by passing through the next color bead, going up through the channel of 3 beads, the accent bead, the clasp, going back down the accent bead, and go back down the 3 seed beads. And turn your thread, go around to the next bead, reinforce in that manner, and keep going. Then after that, you can end your thread by adding half-hitch knots all along the spines, and then cut your thread short. Then you can work in your clasp through the tail end using the same steps and the 4 beads around the circle here. So that is it for the African spiral stitch. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks so much for joining me. Feel free to experiment with different color combinations as well as seed beads shapes and sizes. And even maybe try to play around with the number of beads in a set. For example, this one's 4, try it with 5 or even 3, and see what happens. Have fun with this project, and be sure to check down in the description box for a full materials list and links to where you can purchase supplies. And while you're down there, be sure to subscribe to Aura Crystals for updates on new techniques and project tutorials. And if you'd like to see more of my work, feel free to check out Odin's Musings right here on YouTube or at odinsbeadhall.com.